Bucky Irving will be a top 5 running back. Brian Thomas Jr. will be a top 3 wide receiver. And Bijan Robinson should be the 101 pick in 2025 drafts. Do we actually believe these takes, or is it just April Fools? Find out on today's episode of Locked On Fantasy Football.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts, Michelle Magdziuk, and when I'm not doing this, I'm a researcher and fantasy analyst with NFL Network.
And I'm your other co-host, Vinnie Iyer. When I'm not doing this, I'm writing about NFL fantasy and betting for sportingnews.com. April Fool's Day is here. Happy April Fool's Day, I guess, if you celebrate, and hope you get someone good this day, because it's always fun.
Yeah, and we're going to do a little fun exercise here on April Fools. Today, Vinny and I are going to go through 3 spicy fantasy football takes for 2025, and then we'll answer if we actually believe that take or if it's just April Fools. Before we begin, I want to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. Start today at FanDuel.com or download the FanDuel app today. First spicy take I want to say is Bucky Irving will finish as a top 5 fantasy running back in 2025. Vinny, give me your thoughts.
Well, I'm a big fan of Bucky's, all that stuff, but not as high on Bucky Irving with that. And I'm not joking. This is not an April Fool's joke. Their Buccaneers offensive coordinator name is Josh Gizzard. And I read a headline that said Josh Gizzard might be an offensive wizard. And I was laughing at it. And that's great, but he's no Liam Cohen. He's taken over. He was the passing game coordinator last year, so they did promote from within. You think a lot of things are going to be status quo, but if it's status quo, here are the numbers, right? For Bucky Irving, RB14, RB19. I know it was a transitional year. He was trying to take the job away from Rachaad White, and then he really exploded down the stretch. But there are some limitations with him. He's not going to be a big-time receiving back on this team. He's going to be the finisher if they're leading and they're in position because of their passing game in the red zone. Bucky Irving is going to be the go-to guy. So I think to finish that high, he's going to have a massive scoring season because, again, he's not going to get all those receptions that are going to help here. I mean, they still have Rachaad White hanging around now. It could change, right, if they make a move later. They realize, look, we don't need to carry both these backs. We trust Irving a little bit in the passing game. Then maybe that helps. But Rachaad White is a factor. I mean, he was just a couple years ago a pretty fantasy relevant back in his own right. I mean, different offense, different scheme, all that. But I still think he has some value in that specific role to play off Bucky Irving. I think you don't want to run Bucky Irving to the ground. This, after all, is going to be run second offense. It's still very pass first, especially now you have the emergence of Jalen McMillan. You have Chris Godwin is going to be healthy, we think. So that gives them 3 receivers where they can throw downfield. I think they could bolster tight end a little bit behind Cade Otton here. So they could have a lot of weapons here in the passing game, but I'm not sure Irving is going to get too much involved. So again, this is a significant jump here, right? RB19 average, that's saying he's going to go 14 spots. He's going to say 9 spots with his total scoring if he can stay healthy, and that still put him in the RB2 range. So based on the numbers, based on really the transition, going to a similar offense, but maybe with a little bit more passing, I think I'm fooled by Bucky Irving. I'm not falling for that fool's gold in the top 5.
Let me give you the reason why I think that I can actually believe this take and that it's not just an April Fool's take. And yes, running back 19 in points per game last year as a rookie. But as you mentioned, it took some time for him to get going. It took time for him to take over this backfield. But he did take over this backfield. And from weeks 10 through 18, he was the running back 7 in points per game behind only Jahmyr Gibbs, Saquon Barkley, Bijan Robinson, Josh Jacobs, Jonathan Taylor, and Chase Brown. Now, and that was with counting week 14 when he played about 5 seconds. He had 4 rushing attempts before he left that game. That was a 2-point game. The rest of the games were absolutely fantastic. So that hurt his ranking just a little bit. In the 8 games, he had at least 10 carries last year. He averaged 18.7 points per game in half PPR. That was 7 of those 8 games came from weeks 10 on. So again, he didn't take over till halfway in the season. that 18.7 points per game would have gotten him even more points per game than Bijan Robinson scored last year at 18.3. And Bijan Robinson was the running back 4 on the season. He averaged 20 points per game in games he played at least 50% of the snaps. And again, all of those games were after week 10. It was week 12, 13, 16, 17, and 18. And then, there was one game in week 6. But like he just looked so good out there. And they've been talking about nonstop on this team, the coaching staff. And he's just so productive when they give him the opportunity. I do think he has a chance to be top 5 because you look here at the running backs, right? And you can't place him over Saquon, Bijan Robinson, or Jahmyr Gibbs. But after that, there's a bunch of guys with question marks in CMC with this injury. Jonathan Taylor with who in the world is the quarterback? What will this Colts offense look like? Devin Achane, up and down inconsistencies. Will Tua stay healthy? Derrick Henry age. Josh Jacobs, doesn't get utilized as much as we'd like. Ashton Genty, a rookie. Kyron Williams, I know you wouldn't definitely put him above Bucky, I don't think. So a bunch of question marks here for that 4th and 5th spot. I will not be personally shocked if Bucky Irving takes the final 2 spots in the top 5.
Yeah, I mean, I think the path is there, but there's just some other values I look a little bit more. Like, I don't want to pound the table. I think he was a great value last year, right? When you picked him up and you drafted him, and he was an afterthought behind Rachaad White, but we knew he had upside. He was touted coming out of Oregon. So we knew some people thought he was the most talented back in the draft, and he kind of proved it last year, right? So I think everyone is going to be on him a little bit more, and therefore it doesn't make it as good of a value. And I don't think he's going to finish that high. So I think he'll have his moments, but I think you'll see this Bucs team change things a little bit with the personnel in terms of the usage. And again, they want to be careful with Irving. I mean, they don't need to go nuts here with him and need to preserve him a little bit as they go down the stretch. And if they indeed are the playoff team again from the NFC South, then you want to keep him a little bit for the second half when he can run downhill and take some games over. So I think they'll be careful. Again, I think he could finish easily top 10, top 8. I'm not willing to go as bold and be fooled in the top 5. I think there's a few guys I would take over him, or just skip that and maybe go to a wide receiver a little bit around. It just depends on who's available. So again, it's a mild fooling of myself, but I'm going to not buy him as a RB5 in the top 5.
Yeah, looking at his advanced stats, I just keep buying in more and more and more. Yards per carry behind only Derrick Henry, Barkley, and Gibbs. His forced missed tackle rate, 37% of his rushing attempts, he forced at least one missed tackle. That was the best among running backs with 200 carries. The next closest was Bijan Robinson at 32%. And then expected points added per carry, only Jahmyr Gibbs and Derrick Henry average more expected points added per carry, with Barkley and Bijan right behind him in the top 5. So Irving was so good, much better than the rest of his teammates. I think the coaching staff will see that, even the new coaching staff. And then Rachaad White, who even knows if he's still on the team next year, right? So then it could be just Sean Tucker. But we'll see what they do with that backfield. But you're going with Fool's Gold. You're saying April Fools. And I'm saying I believe that take. We're going to get into our next take. Brian Thomas Jr. has the ceiling. I don't even actually want to say has the ceiling. Brian Thomas Jr. will be a top 3 wide receiver in 2025. Let's make this super bold. We will get to that right after a quick break. This episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you can stop managing your money and start building wealth. When I started using Monarch, I realized just how much I was spending on food deliveries, and now I budget smarter and save more. It's also super easy to use this system with your partner and to manage your money with your partner. It's smoother more than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. You get to take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year. All right, second bold take of today. And is it April Fool's or do we believe it? Brian Thomas Jr. will be a top 3 fantasy wide receiver in 2025. Now, you might be saying that's not too crazy. He was the wide receiver 4 in his rookie season. However, he was the wide receiver 11 in fantasy points per game, right? So he played the full 17 games, helped his fantasy points out a bit. And they changed offensive coordinators. And honestly, his best games came with Mac Jones, right? So he's going to be changing quarterbacks too. And you'd say, well, it has to get better to go to Trevor Lawrence instead of Mac Jones. But he did have more success with Mac Jones. So tell me, Vinny, which side are you on here with this take?
Yeah, I would like to believe that he can be a top 3 wide receiver, but I'm going to have to knock down somebody that isn't Jamar Chase or Justin Jefferson from that crown. And like, there's some rebound opportunities from people. I think AJ Brown could ascend a little bit more. CeeDee Lamb could have a rebound year. You could have Puka Nacua scoring a little bit more with the Rams. So I think there's a lot of other people that can get in there. And look, it was a great rookie season, but we have to see, is he going to be marked a little bit more? Is everyone going to be ready for him? Are they going to get enough diverse weapons here? Because they did say goodbye to Christian Kirk and Evan Ingram so far. They've only added a little bit here to offset that. So I'm not sure what you're going to get from this Jaguars passing game. It's in transition. I do like the potential volume with Liam Cohen. We talked about him in the first segment leaving Tampa, but he comes to Jacksonville. He's going to treat Brian Thomas a little bit like Mike Evans, but I think the Buccaneers are going to diversify their passing game a little bit. Cohen needs some more guys he can throw to, so I don't know if he's going to totally trust in like a Gabe Davis type. Do they get a deep threat in the draft to add to this mix? So wide receiver is definitely a need for them without Kirk after making that move with the Texans. So tight end could also be a little bit of a factor here for the Jaguars. So I think they'll try to get a little bit extra weaponry here. And look, it's really hard to crack the top 3. I'll just say that. Like, there's just too many people there. I like him right where he's at, kind of at wide receiver 8. Like, I like him 6 through 8. So it's not really a stretch. I'm not being that fooled by him. But I think I'd have to just really be bold to go in that direction. So, again, I'm calling April Fools. Like, I'm not one to be fooled easily. You really have to sell it to me hard. And I think Brian Thomas Jr. is a good sale, but I just can't go all the way up to top 3.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at his end of year production, it was absolutely amazing. He was one of 3 wide receivers to score 100 plus fantasy points from weeks 13 through 17. That was the last 6 weeks 13 through 18. Sorry. That was the last 6 weeks of the season behind only Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson that he scored fantasy points. And then when you look at the fantasy playoff games in weeks 15, 16, 17, he scored at least 20 fantasy points in all 3 of those games. No wide receiver scored more fantasy points than Brian Thomas Jr. in the fantasy playoffs. So we really got to see him ascend to greatness towards the end of his rookie season. And he was getting so many targets. Now, maybe you're worried the targets will go down, but this offseason hasn't really gone that way, right? If Trevor Lawrence is there, hopefully they can stay on the field more instead of Mac Jones under center to allow for more passing opportunities. And then also Evan Ingram's gone, who had the second most targets on this team last year. And then you have Christian Kirk, who was traded. Now, Christian Kirk did miss a lot of time last year, but still, it's good that he's gone. So right now, he has very little competition. We'll see if they use that first round pick on a wide receiver, and that could change things. But I was just really impressed with what Brian Thomas did last year. And when you're looking at his fantasy points from last season at 14 points per game, yes, that was wide receiver 11, so far from a top 3 wide receiver. But the only other rookie wide receivers to ever have at least 14 fantasy points, average that in their rookie year, was Odell Beckham, Randy Moss, Jamar Chase, Malik Neighbors from last year, Anquan Boldin, Puka Nacua, and Justin Jefferson, and Mike Evans. So when you look at that, all of those guys have turned into studly fantasy assets. I say all this, and it is still really hard to get him to feel confident about this take in the top 3, right? Because like you mentioned, Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson, you have to put them there. If they're healthy and they're out there, they're going to finish as a top 2 guy. So that means there's one spot left for Brian Thomas Jr. And do we feel confident saying he can finish over CeeDee Lamb, over Puka Nacua, over Nico Collins, over Amon-Ra St. Brown? Maybe Tyreek Hill, comes back to life. Maybe AJ Brown has a big season. maybe a random guy who breaks out like there is one every year, like has this huge year. Maybe it's Malik Neighbors who's in there instead of Brian Thomas Jr. So it is hard to say I believe this take. So I am going to have to go also with you. April Fools. I can't fully say I have confidence in this take.
Yeah, and look, if you could be doing a lot worse than just putting LC receivers at the top, right? You could really start rankings looking at Chase, Jefferson, and go right here to Thomas and then Neighbors, and then you wouldn't be totally wrong, right? I think you'd have a fine team if Brian Thomas was your wide receiver one. But we have to weigh there's some better things that maybe you do at running back. Again, I like Thomas a lot, but this is a little bit of a stretch. I mean, it's also hard to duplicate that high of a season when you come out as a rookie. And look, we're looking at his scoring at wide receiver 4. I mean, that's fantastic, but there's some transitional stuff here that we have to look at with the Jaguars. Again, they get enough. They need a little bit more, right, of weaponry to make us feel good that he's not going to be just taken out of games or double teamed all the time. So I think they'll do that, but at the same time, the targets will be spread out a little bit more. So it's kind of a balance of the both, where you want somebody to deflect attention, but not enough where they have too many mouths to feed and trying to get everyone involved. Right now, Thomas is kind of needing just a little bit of extra help, right? That would be good for him going forward. But all this to say, again, there are a lot of great candidates to go at wide receiver 3, so we just can't lock into one, I don't think, right now. I think 1, 2 is set, but 3 is going to be long debated here as we go through the summer and preseason, and we'll finally come up with an answer there.
Yeah, I will say, to give one reason why I could see this happening is that 9 games last year, he had at least 8 targets, which it's hard not to envision him getting nearly, averaging 8 targets a game next year, because it does seem like he's going to be the clear-cut top target in this team. But in the 9 games last year, he saw at least 8 targets. He did average 18 fantasy points per game in half PPR. Mm-hmm. Only Jamar Chase averaged more than 18 fantasy points per game last year. Justin Jefferson was at 15.6 points per game last year. So he would have been Brian Thomas with those targets would have been easily the wide receiver 2 on the season. And almost all of those games came in week 13 on. It was every single game, weeks 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. He had at least 8 targets or more. He actually had at least 10 in all of those. So there's definitely a path there. But like we said, it's just a little too rich for our taste. So we're going to go April Fools. And we have one more take for you. And we'll see if we're playing April Fools here again, or if we actually believe in the take. That take is Bijan Robinson should be the 101 of the draft in 2025. We'll get to that right after a quick break.
All right, it is March Madness time, and it's the end here. Final Four, we got 3 games left. Don't forget, also the women's bracket is coming down to the stretch as well. So all that good stuff, the best teams on the biggest stage here in both San Antonio and Tampa. And FanDuel is giving you a chance to get on the action like never before with March Madness. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet hits. That's $200 in extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories. There's no more Cinderellas. You're looking at the powerhouses here and who's cutting down the nets. You can bet on that. It's going to be a lot of fun here. We've had some great basketball going in, and now you have all favorites here, so it's going to be great and a lot of good stuff to get in on. You can pick your own favorites there with the spreads, totals, and game props. With tournament games happening all this weekend, there's always something exciting to bet on, not just the game outcome, but with players as well. The FanDuel app is simple to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. There's no waiting around. So visit FanDuel.com and get in on the college hoops action before the tournament is over. Again, that's only at FanDuel.com, America's #1 sportsbook. All right, Michelle, it is time to close the show. One more. And I came up with this one for us to discuss because I might actually be believing it, full disclosure, but I want to see your take on it first. Bijan Robinson, not Saquon Barkley, not Derrick Henry, not Jahmyr Gibbs, not Jamar Chase, should be the 101 pick in fantasy in 2025.
Yeah, so last year he was the running back 4 total and an average points per game. But it was a slow start for him, right? Weeks 1 through 5, he only averaged 11.7 points per game. From week 6 through 18, he was averaging 21 points per game, most among running backs during that span, which is a huge chunk of the season. It was more than Jahmyr Gibbs scored. It's more than Saquon Barkley scored during that time. They were all pretty close to each other, but it was Bijan as the running back one overall from week 6 through 18 in 2024. And then with Michael Penix Jr., who you think, ooh, maybe it'll get worse. Well, in the 3 games that Penix Jr. started last year, Bijan was a beast with 23 points, 23 and 30 points in those games. So I'm not so worried about Michael Penix being there, right? And when you're looking at the top here at running backs of like, who would you take over Bijan Robinson? You got Saquon Barkley, where you're worrying about the usage, especially not even just the regular season usage, but he played all the way through the Super Bowl. So 4 extra games, right? And then the age, and then you have Jahmyr Gibbs. You have to worry about Ben Johnson, plus sharing the field with David Montgomery. You have Derrick Henry, another guy. You have to worry about the age. So when it comes to running backs, I think I'm definitely on the side of Bijan Robinson should be the top running back to go. I think the question now is he worth it over the top wide receiver, right? And I do think I'm leaning towards Bijan over Justin Jefferson because he has another new quarterback, likely J.J. McCarthy in his first year. And then, so it really comes down to Bijan Robinson or Jamar Chase. Now, that's the toughest question. Do I believe the 101 should be Bijan over Jamar Chase? Let me hear your argument first, and then I'll decide.
Well, this is not that Bijan Robinson early career garbage that we were dealing with, right? He came in as a rookie. Arthur Smith didn't know how to use him. They were working in Tyler Algier at very inconvenient times. And then they just realized, look, Bijan, we drafted him high. Let's just go and put him on the field. So they basically did that with Drake London and Bijan, not so much with Kyle Pitts because he just kind of underwhelmed here. But I think the reason he took off with Michael Penix is that Penix actually gave him a little bit more upside. He could open the field a little bit more. He was willing to throw downfield. I think Kirk Cousins was losing some things on his fastball and just wearing down a little bit, where I think Michael Penix, that threat of him, I know he's not a runner based on what he did in college, but he is athletic enough where he can take off and give you those yards. So you do have to watch him a little bit doing that. And then maybe the line shift as well, where we're going to the left-handed quarterback, and then things change a little bit with the blocking pattern. I think that was also a benefit. And then Bijan, we know, can do everything on the field. He's explosive. He can finish in the red zone. He can catch passes. And now you have a younger quarterback, so there could be more checkdowns. And Penix is more likely to check down and throw off than some of these more pure running quarterbacks. Like Penix will get some rushing yards, but it won't be a significant dent. He'll be moving around mainly to buy time. So when you look at that, Robinson is going to be his key checkdown guy. They're going to lean on the run, you would expect, much like a Sean McVay type of offense does when they can do it. And I think you definitely look at the Falcons. They need to get a center to replace Drew Dahlman, but this offensive line is still pretty good with some of the pieces they have. So downhill running, the receiving, the explosiveness, the scoring, the red zone use, all that says that Bijan is in his prime. This is the time to attack Bijan, and this is the time where I know Michelle liked him as the 101 potentially as a rookie. It's finally your time, Michelle. No fooling. He's the guy that you want to take above everyone else, I think, in fantasy, because I think he could have a big year. He could have definitely the magic 20 and 2,000 yards from scrimmage and 20 touchdowns. I think that's definitely attainable here for Bijan Robinson this season.
You know what? I do too, because especially with Michael Penix Jr. going in next year as the starter, they have to lean on the run game so much, right? And they're going to be leaning on Bijan. And Penix is a guy that will dump it off to Bijan as well. And then also, like you mentioned, like when they get near the goal line, it's all Bijan Robinson, and they're going to lean on Bijan a lot more than trusting Michael Penix Jr. around the goal line. So you're right. 20 touchdowns is viable for him next year. 300 carries is viable. And when he's gotten the work throughout his career, he has been electric. And it's finally he got away from Arthur Smith last year, and we saw great things. So it would be a really, really hard choice at the 101. And I don't know if I'd want the 101 this year because there's not that clear-cut option, but it would be pretty much a coin flip for me with Bijan or Jamar Chase. Now, the reason I would slightly lean Bijan Robinson is because of the positional scarcity and how hard it is to find those elite running backs. And if Bijan can get you that season, then he will be the league winner like Saquon Barkley was this year. But I mean, Chase was also a league winner last year, but you need Chase to repeat what he did. That's really hard to repeat performances that elite, that electric as Chase had. Bijan hasn't had that type of season yet, right? And this third year could be totally in his prime, and this could be his best year of his career. So I think I'm with you. that I'm totally believing in this take that I want Bijan Robinson to be the 101 of drafts next year.
Yeah, and look, I've heard some foolish takes, and one is that Arthur Smith is an innovative guy that is going to help whoever the Steelers' young quarterback is to help him mature and grow and all that stuff. But they did not play fantasy with the Atlanta Falcons, these people that are making these takes, when we saw Arthur Smith. And really last year, Steelers didn't have a lot going on either in terms of fantasy department, even in the running game. That's supposed to be one of his strengths, right? Najee Harris was so ineffective, and then he moved on to a place where all of a sudden we're excited about him in Los Angeles. And so, look, if that's any indication that says getting away from Arthur Smith is the best thing, whether you just stay in town and he leaves, or Najee Harris leaves Pittsburgh and goes to Los Angeles. So, again, you just have to throw out all that stuff from earlier. I mean, the only thing that's carrying over is Kyle Pitts stinks. Everything else goes forward where, look, we've given Pitts all the chances. We gave Bijan the benefit of the doubt that he was talented and he was being misused. And we were spot on about that. He was being misused. You draft a running back that high, you want to give him touches. Now, it's a unique situation with Jahmyr Gibbs, right? Because they have a second back, but they just run so much. They're explosive. They put up that many points. Where the Falcons are trying to find their way a little bit, and you got to put the centerpiece to be Bijan Robinson. And again, what puts him right up there is that he's in his prime. He's young. He hasn't had any injury issues over like a Breece Hall or Christian McCaffrey. We know that he can catch like 50 balls. Like that could definitely happen here with Michael Penix throwing short passes. So I like him in this offense. I like the line. I like maybe the Falcons being competitive. And if they're not, then they just throw to him a lot and he catches 8 balls for 60 in a game, and you're rolling with him with those points as well. So there's just less margin for him failing. Let's just say that. The one thing that could happen, he gets hurt, but everyone can get hurt. And so far, he has not shown any indication that durability is going to be an issue, especially when in a young man in his prime.
Yep, those are all fantastic points. That is going to be it for today's show. I want to thank you all for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen today. But for your second listen, check out the Locked On NFL Draft with Damian Parson and Keith Sanchez. Now that the season is over, get the latest draft rankings, rumors, and news every day. Find Locked On NFL on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. The rest of the week, we're going to get back to our toughest players to rank by position. Tomorrow, we're going to be hitting on the top 6 toughest wide receivers to rank for 2025. Don't miss it. We'll talk to you then. Bye, y'all.